Parashat Vayeshev, which is in Genesis 37. So if you know your Genesis, then we're beginning with the story of Joseph, right? And Bob, would you do me a favor and go over to this other room and ask him politely to... Yes, thank you. All right, so Genesis 37, in verse 1, although the portion begins in verse 1, the section of Genesis actually begins in verse 2. In verse 2, we read, "These are the records of the generations of Jacob." And we know that the book of Genesis is organized into these 10 sections, 10 plus 1, right? 10 times where it says, these are the generations of, these are the generations of, plus chapter 1, Genesis 1. That does not begin that way, but it is a section, introductory section, setting things up for the phrases, this is what became of. So we've talked about this phrase, these are the generations of, which really means, the way they function is that with the meaning, this is what became of. This is what became of. So we have here in this case, this is what became of Jacob. This is what became of Jacob. And if you have a chance to go and find my Facebook page and download, you can find there a link to my master's thesis that I wrote just a few months ago. I wrote it on the book of Genesis. And I explained there in details, maybe a little too nerdy details, but I explained there in detail all of these things that I bring here in Genesis that we don't have time to do here, of course. And if you're not on Facebook, you can ask me, get my email, and I can email it to you if you want it. So I was actually in preparation for today. I was actually looking a little bit over my thesis, and I remember, oh yeah, that's right, that in order to explain it better, the phrase, I have a section there where I translated, this is what became of the seed of, and then you put in the name, right? So this is what became of the seed of Jacob. This is what became of the seed of Terah. And then that makes a lot of sense, because what follows then is the story about the descendants, their seed. But thinking of it that way helps us keep that in focus, that the story that follows here is about the seed. It's about what became about this person. And taking it even a step further, the reason why we have an emphasis on the seed is because it is based on Genesis 3:15, where it talks about the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. That's the reference to the seed here. We have a couple of sections in a couple of Toldot section, a couple of these this is what became of sections. One is about Ishmael. This is what became of the seed of Ishmael. But Ishmael is not the seed of the woman. And there's another one that talks about Esau, actually right before this one here in 36. But Esau is not the seed of the woman. So it isn't only tracing the seed of the woman, it is also tracing the seed of the serpent. And so in that regard also, these sections, there are some sections that are independent and there are some sections that are dependent. The way we know is because in the Hebrew, it begins with the word and. And these are the and this is what became of Terah. So we have a section that says and that says this is what became of Shem. And so under Shem we have several other subsections. So some of these sections are independent, like this is what became of Shem. It does not begin with and. And then some sections are dependent, because it says, and this is what became of Esau, and this is what became of Ishmael, and this is what became of Isaac.
So the and is dependent.
The and is dependent. Think about how we even speak in English and write in English. If I start a sentence by telling you, and then I came, you're like, there's something that it's supposed to come before that, because that phrase depends on, okay, tell me what was before that. Obviously there was something before that. And that's exactly how these sections work. That you have, this is what became of Shem, and then you have, and this is what became of Terah, and this is what became of Isaac, and this. So obviously, this is what became of the descendants of Shem. So Shem is a primary section, and then Terah and Isaac and Ishmael and Esau are subsections within the section of Shem. So we have 5 of these. We actually have 10, right? So 5 are independent, 5 are dependent. So the independent ones are very revealing, because you have the first one is, this is what became of heaven and earth. So it's all encompassing, all universe. This is what became of all of creation. Okay. Then the next one is, this is what became of Adam. It's an independent sentence. Then we have, this is what became of Noah, also independent. So now we have 3 that are independent. The fourth one is, this is what became of Shem. And the last one, the fifth one, is this one here. This is what became of Jacob. So when we look at these 5 independent sections, and we look closely to, we take out the first one, that's an all-encompassing, all of creation. And then we look at the last 4, we have Adam, Noah, Shem, and Jacob. So we know that Noah is functioning like a new Adam, in a way, right? All of creation starts again. Noah is now like in the place of Adam. Everybody's going to be his descendants. But also, in a way, Shem fulfills that function too. Because now Shem begins as father of all of the Semite people. And so you get a little window there as to what's coming. Israel is what's coming. So you're differentiating all of the rest of humanity from the Semites. But within the Semites, you're going to have the Ishmaelites, which is your Arab, in general terms. And so there's a need to further focus the descendants, and that's where Jacob comes in. So we don't usually attribute that much importance to Jacob, but Jacob does have tremendous importance. So much so that the text of Genesis places Jacob at the same level with Adam, Noah, Shem, and Jacob. That's pretty amazing. And the reason is because the focus is finally reduced to the minimum. Now we're focusing on the people of Israel, the descendants of Jacob. Not just the descendants of Isaac, because then you will have Esau there. Not just the descendants of Abraham, because you will have Ishmael there, but specifically the focus is being reduced to specifically the sons of Jacob. And so then when we come to, and when I say that, when I say, the focus is on the sons of Jacob, I don't want it to be misunderstood that, well, the Jewish people are God's favorite. Duh. That's not at all what I'm trying to say, or honestly, what the Bible itself is saying. It's the Bible that's putting Jacob at the same level with Adam and Noah and Shem. It's the Bible that's doing that, right? Not the Jewish people. But the reason is that God chose a nation for himself so that he can sanctify the rest of the nations. He tried it for a long time with all of humanity, and it resulted in the flood, and it resulted in the Tower of Babel. So he said, let me go at this in a different way. Let me reorganize things. And so when he confused the languages, in essence, what he did was create nations. That's what resulted from the confusion of the languages. That every tribe, every language found their own land and became their own nation. So now, God, instead of trying to shepherd humanity as a whole, he is doing it through one nation. He divided them into nations, organized them into nations, and chose one nation to continue to do the work that he was already doing before Abraham, which is to bless all of humanity, to bring blessing to all of humanity. So the reason why God chose a nation was to bless all the other nations. That's the reason why. To demonstrate to all of the nations what it means to be a holy nation, and to show what it means that God is the God of your nation to all the rest of the nations. Many people try to knock off a little bit the conservative notion that America is a Christian nation, and it started as a godly nation, and it was dedicated to God from the inception. And they try to knock that off. Well, what are you saying? That the United States is the new Israel? No, you don't have to say that. There's a middle ground. There's another position there. It doesn't have to be you're either Israel or you're nothing as a nation. Those are not the only two possible positions there. Because God is working with Israel and through Israel in order to bless the nations. Yes, the nations come as individuals. So he does not have a covenant with the United States the way he has a covenant with Israel. That's not what we're saying. But let me give you a biblical example. When you take a Nazirite vow, when we see in Scripture people taking a Nazirite vow, a Nazirite attained a level of holiness that is comparable only to that of the high priest. Pretty amazing. When we see the restrictions that are on the high priest, and the restrictions that are on the person who takes a Nazarite vow, pretty high, a pretty high level of holiness, without becoming a priest, without being, from the tribe of Levi, from the sons of Aaron. And so this person enters into a vow, which is same thing as a covenant, enters into a vow with the Lord. And so now this person can't just do what they want. They committed themselves to live with that level of holiness. Well, you can pretty much dedicate just about anything to God. And it becomes holy, even if it normally isn't. We have dedicated our wallets and our bank accounts to the Lord, haven't we? Right? We've told him we will tithe from everything that you provide for us. When we don't, it's like, uh-oh. You are using something that you dedicated to him now as holy. Even if we don't live in the times of the Hebrew Bible, even if there's no temple, no, that doesn't apply. This is still a thing that if you say, I'm going to dedicate this for you, and you don't, you're going to have consequences, because in essence you are treating something that is holy as if it wasn't. And that's never works out well. Never.
I have a question about the macro-micro thing.
Yeah.
So if he originally chose the world, it's resulted in them not choosing him back, and then he chooses Israel, could you take that, going from the macro to the could you take that even one step further and say that Yeshua is even, so now he's choosing one man to bless all of humanity. First it was all humanity, then the nation of Israel, then, is that a parallel?
In some ways, I think so. Although I think from the beginning, what he had in mind was obviously, because not only because, well, we know Yeshua, but also because the first promise said, and in your seed, singular. So he always had in mind one person, the Messiah, to bless. But I think it's comparable, thinking in those terms.
Just in the natural, even though that was the plan all along, what we see worked out in the natural just continues to
Yeah, it's kind of like it's kind of like a principle that we see. He works that way. He works that way. So, all right. So all of this to highlight the importance not only of this section of the descendants of Jacob, of the seed of Jacob, but to be able to understand it. Because what we're going to find out is that for the rest of Genesis, we have an emphasis on two people, on two of the descendants of Jacob. Joseph, obviously, but then also Judah. A lot of people get confused. It's like, so why do you throw Judah in the middle of the story of Joseph, and then you go back to Joseph? It's like, that makes no sense. Well, yeah, because you're not seeing it from this perspective, that what's been highlighted here is the descendants of Jacob. And it's telling us that this issue of the seed of the woman is going to fall to two people, to two tribes, to two descendants of Jacob, which is going to be Joseph. Joseph is going to get a double portion, as if he was the oldest son. Remember, the oldest son, Reuben, went into Jacob's bed with one of his concubines, and so he lost his status as the firstborn. And then Simeon, which is next, and Levi, they were the ones that orchestrated this attack on those who raped Dinah, Jacob's daughter. So because of that, they too got slashed from that. So the fourth one in line is actually Judah. So what we see happening then is that the dynamics of being the firstborn is going to fall into between the two of them. Because it is through Judah that the seed of the woman is going to come, right? Messiah, Yeshua, we know that. The king is going to come through Judah, not through Joseph. Not through Joseph. I don't know if you, sometimes it's kind of hard to keep track, but if you remember when the kingdom was divided after Solomon died, Rehoboam came in and as the king of the north when it was split between the north and the south. Well, he's a descendant of Joseph. Not a legitimate king. So that these divisions between them, it goes throughout Scripture. It's kind of hidden. You have to kind of look and dig a little bit. You have to spend precious time and eyesight reading for hours and hours to get to this, but it's there. That's what we see in this section. I focus on two. I focus on Joseph, who is going to get a double portion of the wealth of the material inheritance, and he gets two tribes, right? The tribe of Manasseh and the tribe of Ephraim, and two sections in Israel, because then one of his sons basically takes a portion that would have been for Levi, because Levi did not inherit land as a priest.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So that's how that works. But the kinship and the ultimate coming of Messiah is through Judah. That's why we see the story of both of them here. All right. So I wanted to talk to you really about the first four verses here in this section, because when we begin reading, it says, "This is what became of Jacob," right? The next word, it's not a new verse, even though we see that blank space, that's not in the Torah. The space is not there. Right. The words continue. So what it says is, this is what became of Jacob. The next word is Joseph. It is that way in English, in this, at least in this version. Joseph, when 17 years of age, and it is also in the Hebrew. And Hebrew is flexible in terms of word order. And we can do that a little bit in English, right? We're familiar with Yoda speak, right? That's what that's all about. It's changing the word order. And it isn't, for the most part, it's not, it still falls within the boundaries of English for the most part when we hear Yoda speak. Hebrew has more flexibility than even English, and they can put the word they want to emphasize, they can put it at the beginning. This happens mostly with verbs, and we can understand that because you're going to put the main action right at the beginning, right? But when you put something different than a verb, even more impressive. It's like, whoa, why do you start with the name? It's like, it's a strong, strong emphasis. There is no way to highlight, to bold, to italicize, to underline. There's no way to do that, right? Except you can change the word order. And that gets the attention of the reader. So that's for emphasis here. So it's a strong emphasis here on Joseph. But watch what it says about Joseph. The reason why he puts Joseph first is because the movie is not going to start with action. The movie is going to start with description of character. Description of character that helps us understand the action. Helps us understand why. So let's look at it. The first thing, there are two things about Joseph that this verse is going to tell us, verse 2. And it is actually going to say it twice. So imagine that. It's already highlighting Joseph. It's already describing the character. It's going to tell us two things about him, and it's going to tell us twice the same thing in different ways. So the author here, which is the Holy Spirit, he really wants to tell you something. Really wants to tell you something. So here's what he says. Joseph, when 17 years of age, was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah. Did you get it? All right, let me spell it out for you. What we have here is a reference to his age and a reference to his brothers. And he says it twice. So first time it says he's 17 years old. The second time it says he's a youth. So it's like the first thing you need to know about Joseph is that he's a kid. And the second thing is that as a kid, he is interacting with his brothers who are not. Joseph was the last to be born in Padan Aram, still, right before they came back to the land of Israel. And he's about 12 years younger than Reuben, who is the firstborn. 12, 12 years younger. So here he's 17, which means Reuben is a 30-year-old man.
Yeah.
Right? And so he's a kid interacting with these men. The reason, what the text is trying to communicate to us is that Joseph was innocent. He was naive. And when you reading the book of Proverbs, the book of Proverbs is going to tell us about three people. It talks about the fool. That's bad. Being a fool is bad, no matter how you slice it. It's going to talk to us about the wise. That's the good guys, right? It's good to be wise, even if you're poor, even if you don't have gold, even if, whatever. It's good to be wise. But there's one in the middle that's kind of like in the middle of the road. It's like, you gotta move. You can't stay there. It is dangerous to be naive. This simple. It is dangerous. That's what Joseph is. So he is a simple man, not yet a wise man, but he's interacting with guys that are not only older than him in age, but they know the world. They are men of the world. And here they're interacting with this kid. This is not going to go well. Not going to go well. And the text is also very interested in telling us why was Joseph this way? Why was he not wise? And let me show you. It says Joseph broke a bad report about them to their father, and we'll return to this phrase because it's a very revealing phrase here. Verse 3, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons. Okay, so we know this is not going to be good, right? We know having favorites in a family is not going to be good. What's interesting is that Jacob had already lived through that. he was his mother's favorite, and his brother was his father's favorite. It can be very dramatic, very traumatic even, to grow up and knowing that your dad has favorites, and you ain't it. That can really mess up a boy, a young man. But this actually then becomes a generational iniquity in this family. It is a bent, unhealthy bent that is transmitted from one generation to the other. So even though Joseph lived through it and he saw the consequences also in his brother, from not being so much loved by his mother and how that messed him up. Still, Jacob did not learn from it and repeated the same thing. He had a favorite. And the thing is that this is going to also mess Joseph up. Because what it did is it left Joseph unprotected in a world of men as a young man who had no wisdom. I'm not saying he has zero wisdom, but I'm saying that he wasn't a fool. He was a godly young man, but he was a simple man. He was not wise yet.
He's still a boy.
Yeah, that's what that word means actually. That he was a youth. Yeah, that.
Several times he should have said, kept something to himself, but he said, "You're going to bow down and worship me." That's not a good thing.
Yeah, usually it's going to come through the things you say, right? And let me show you one more thing. Because it says, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons because. When you see a because, it's like the text is actually telling you why. Pay attention. Pay attention. So it says, because he was the son of his old age. He was the son of his old age. Well, this could mean a couple of things. The wrong meaning is that Joseph was born when Jacob was old. That's not what this means. It's not as simple as that. What this actually means is that Joseph was born when Jacob was about 40 years old. He was around 20 when he had to escape, and he spent 20 years with Laban. So Joseph was born approximately when he was, late 30s, 40 maybe. And so he comes back. When Jacob comes back to the land, he already suffered for 20 years under the hand of Laban. Tricked him up and not letting him go, and having all these problems, all these wives, and a lot of it was also his own choices, obviously. He's coming from a home in which there was all of this favoritism and hatred and all of those things. When he comes back then to the land of Israel, remember all of the things that happened to him. First off, he's confronted by Esau, and he thinks Esau's just coming to kill him. And he devised the camp, he devised the children, and he's like just waiting for Esau to come and just kill him. That is a lot of stress. That's very traumatic. Very traumatic. I remember one time, it's probably, I'm going to say 1995 or so. I was getting ready to go to the mission field, and a church gave me, and this is a church in Venezuela, so this is like very sacrificial giving. They gave me a check for $500. And so I went in and I cashed the check, and I was going to go and deposit it in my account at a different bank. And I was robbed. The guy, the actual bank employee, the teller, he was in it. He was in on it. He made a signal that I didn't catch at the time. What he did is he lifted up my check and he looked at, like you're checking a bill, you know, $100 bill. You don't do that to a check. There's no need to do that to a check.
No.
And later on, I found out that they actually did this. This was a thing. And so when the bank was in a mall. So when I got out of the mall, I went up, and you know, as I'm walking into the parking lot, then a couple of kids, no more than 13, with a gun, give me the money. So I didn't say a single word. I just, bye. I know that I know these kids are dead today. I know they're dead. They killed somebody, they got killed, you know, whatever. Hopefully they found the Lord.
Right.
Hopefully, right? Hopefully they went to jail and found the Lord, and whatever. But I know what it is to be under gunpoint and then living the next few days. I remember getting into the subway, and I will go to the end of the line to make sure that there was nobody around me. And I will sit also at the end, you know, where there's nobody behind me, and I could have everybody. You know, it's very traumatic. So imagine here, your own brothers coming to kill you, coming with 400 men coming to kill you. Whew. It's pretty bad, pretty bad. So he goes through that. Then I forget a little bit of the chronological order. Then his daughter is raped. Imagine that. Then his two sons go in and organize an attack on a king and their nation, and you're just a guy in his early 40s with a bunch of kids. That was not good for him. Extra stress added to his life. Then his father dies. So there was, you know, thing after things after things after things happening to Joseph. His sons are, you know, they're a little bit of a mess. Judah's going to go and marry a couple of, he's going to go and marry a Canaanite woman. You know, this is extra stress added to him. So in the middle of all this mess in Jacob's life, he's getting older, and things are not getting easier. It's if you recall at the end of Genesis, when he finally goes to Egypt, and he talks to Pharaoh, he says to Pharaoh, "The days of my life have been few and unpleasant." That's what he says to Pharaoh. The days of my life have been few and unpleasant. He's 130 years old. Few and unpleasant. But the word for unpleasant is the word for evil. As in the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, that evil. Which actually means unfruitful. That's what evil means, to be unfruitful. So he considers himself that way. So here in chapter 37, he's not all the way there yet, but he's getting there. He's experiencing all of these evil things in his life. And there is one thing, only one thing in his life. Oh, one of the other things that happens was that his wife Rachel died. So he's having, you know, bad thing after bad thing. So the only thing that seems to be going well is this little kid that's growing up, and it is so compliant, and is such a good son, and he's just so proud of him. And now he's going to devote everything and pour it on this kid. He's going to be overly protective of this kid. He doesn't want him to die. We know when he tell him he died, which it was a lie, but it was the biggest tragedy of his life. He wants to protect him from his other brothers. And in doing so, he is causing, unfortunately, he's causing damage to Joseph, because he is overly protecting Joseph, and Joseph is not developing he's not developing as a wise young man. So he lacks this wisdom to be able to interact in a world of worldly wise men. And so that's all the setup that we see here. All the setup. In fact, the tunic that he bought for Joseph, that's something that kings wore. That's for kings. And so he's indicating, Joseph's my favorite, and he's going to be king. We see it in the dream, don't we? Remember, all the bundles bow down to Joseph's bundle. The moon, the moon, the sun, and the stars are going to bow down to Joseph. And what did they say? Are you going to reign over us? See, they knew. That was what his father was signaling. And he was getting it wrong, just like his dad too also got it wrong. Just like Isaac thought that Esau was it, Jacob was thinking that the kingship is going to go through Joseph. And he failed to see, no, it's going to go through Judah. Yes?
What I see in my reading and studying of his word, what I see is the Lord guiding everything, even the dreams that he has. And it's foretelling what is going to take place in the future. To me, what I see is just his beautiful hands all over the place. I see how wonderful he is, how loving, how faithful, how gloriously, miraculously tender he is.
Yes.
That's what I see in all the story.
It is that, but it is more. So I'm not saying, that's not there, but I'm saying these two things are here. And they're there for us, not only as parents, but as people who disciple other people, as people who influence other people. We have influence. Even through this passage, I'll be honest with you, I have a tendency to protect Sukkat. I do. And maybe Sukkat is still young, and you do protect your young kids, right? But maybe Sukkat needs to, start becoming a young man, a young woman, right? And so the time is for me to allow Sukkat to become an adult. There's a lot in there. But there's a lot of meat here in this passage for us to just sit with the Holy Spirit and say, okay, can you tell me in my situation personally, what are you trying to tell me? because we all have. Even if we have all children, you know, I'm realizing that it was a lot easier when all I had to do was change their diapers. It was, as much as I complained, it was a lot easier. Now when they are making their own decisions and you know it's not the right one, or at least you think, right? It's like, wow, this is really but we have to learn. We have to learn.
So
All right.
ultimately, what is the old age pointing to? It's not his chronological age.
That it is actually, I mean, he's going towards that, you know, but it is the pain. So he is a great question, because it reminded me, and I'm going to end with this quote. It's a quote I heard this week, and I meant to share it with you, which is, don't allow your pain to become your passion. You've got to guard. That's what Jacob did. All these painful things that he was going through, that were happening to him, shaped him, and he wanted to protect his son from that kind of a life. Sounds good on paper, but it doesn't bring good results. And we see this a lot. We see this in our culture a lot. The people go through pain, and out of that pain, they now have a cause. Now they hate men. That's a very popular one, right? They go through pain at the hand of a man. Now they hate men. And we can do the same in our world. A lot of people have a sense, you know, like, that's my calling. I want to do something about this, and I'm passionate about this. Yeah, but is it because of a pain that you've experienced? Is it because of you want to fix something? Be careful. Be careful. Sometimes you can still do the same thing, the same ministry, but you get healed and you do it from a different place. So we have to be careful. It's not always bad, but we cannot allow our pain to be the basis of our passion. We have to be healed. And then we can use whatever the pain was, you can still use it. But it's not your basis for it. Does that make sense? I think that's a little bit of what Jacob was doing.
Because he had this good thing, this baby born during a painful set of years, then he hyper-focused on this one little thing, and babied it, and
All right, my time is way up. Thank you, everybody.